They say money can't buy you love, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes love leaves you a fortune you never saw coming. I'm holding a letter that's worth more than I've earned in 23 years of cleaning other people's houses, 23 years of being invisible, of scrubbing toilets while my own life went down the drain. But this letter changes everything. My name is Maria, and 3 hours ago, I was just another housekeeper about to lose her job. Now I'm sitting in a dusty attic, staring at words that could either save my life or destroy it completely. You see, Mrs. Henderson didn't just die and leave me unemployed. She died and left me a secret that her own family would kill for. Literally, I found it by accident, or maybe fate, tucked behind her wedding photo while her vulture nephew gave me exactly 72 hours to clear out the junk before selling her Victorian mansion. 72 hours to erase a woman's entire existence. The woman who, unbeknownst to me, had been planning to change my life for months. When I saw my name on that envelope, not Maria, the help, but just Maria, written in her shaky handwriting, my hands started trembling. When I read what was inside, I had to sit down hard on her bedroom floor because my legs gave out. Mrs. Henderson had been hiding a fortune, not just any fortune, a fortune that she'd been secretly setting aside for the one person who'd shown her genuine kindness in her final years, the one person who'd listened to her stories, shared tea in her kitchen and treated her like family when her real family treated her like a burden. That person was me, but here's what's tearing me apart. The letter is dated 3 months before she died. 3 months she carried this secret, planning to tell me, and I never knew she was fighting time. All those afternoons I spent listening to her talk about love lost and dreams deferred. She was holding on to the biggest dream of all, giving me a chance at the life I'd given up hope of ever having. The letter didn't just reveal where she'd hidden her fortune. It revealed something that makes my heart ache even now, how desperately lonely she'd been, and how much our simple human connection meant to her. She wrote that I was the daughter she never had, the family that chose to stay when everyone else left. But there's something else in this letter that has me scared to death. Mrs. Henderson mentions that her nephew has been asking too many questions about her will. She talks about feeling watched and unsafe. She even mentions changing her locks twice in the past year. What if Mrs. Henderson's death wasn't as natural as everyone thought? What if someone in her family discovered her secret? And what if finding this letter puts me in the same danger she was in? I've got 68 hours left to empty this house, and I'm sitting here with a letter that could either give me the life I've always dreamed of, or make me the next target of a family that's already proven they'll do anything for money. The journey that's about to unfold will test everything I believe about luck, about worthiness, about the invisible threads that connect us to the people we're meant to find. It's going to force me to confront my own feelings of inadequacy and decide whether I'm brave enough to claim the blessing that's literally fallen into my hands. But first, I have to figure out if I'm going to survive long enough to enjoy it. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or like your kindness goes unnoticed, this story is for you. If you've ever wondered whether the small acts of compassion we show to others really matter, you need to hear what happened next, because it's about to get dangerous. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of human connection, and subscribe because this story has 10 chapters of twists, revelations, and life-changing moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Comment below if you've ever experienced an unexpected blessing that changed your life, because I'm learning that these moments of grace are more common than we think, and they always seem to find the people who need them most. But right now, I need to decide, do I take this letter and run, or do I stay and fight for what Mrs. Henderson wanted me to have? The clock is ticking, and I'm about to find out just how much my life is worth. 67 hours and counting. That's how long I have left before Richard Henderson turns this house into his personal gold mine, and I'm sitting here with a secret that could either save my life or end it. The letter is still in my hands, and I can't stop reading it. Mrs. Henderson's handwriting gets shakier toward the end, like she knew time was running out. "My dear Maria," it begins, and already I'm crying again because no one has called me dear in years. Not since my husband walked out, taking our savings and my self-respect with him. She writes about the safety deposit box at First National Bank, the one she visited every month for the past 5 years. Box 247. The key is taped under her jewellery box, she says, along with a document that makes me the legal beneficiary of everything inside. Everything her family doesn't know about. I'm reading about accounts in 3 different banks, about investments she made decades ago that her nephew never discovered, about how she sold her late husband's vintage car collection piece by piece, hiding the money from everyone. The numbers she's written down don't make sense at first. Too many zeros, too much hope for someone like me. But then I read the part that makes my blood run cold. If something happens to me before I can tell you this in person, you need to know that Richard has been asking questions. He's been through my papers twice that I know of, and I think he's been in the house when I'm not here. I've changed the locks, but I don't think that's enough. Mrs. Henderson was scared. Really scared, and now she's dead, and I'm the only one who knows what she was hiding. The house feels different now, like it's watching me. Every creak of the old floorboards makes me jump. Every shadow in the hallway could be someone coming for what's mine now. What's mine, if I'm brave enough to take it? I hear a car in the driveway, and my heart stops. Through the dusty window, I see Richard's black Mercedes. He's early. He's not supposed to be here for another hour, and I'm not ready. I'm not ready for any of this. I fold the letter carefully and slip it into my bra, the safest place I can think of. My hands are shaking as I grab the feather duster and try to look busy. Normal, like I'm just the housekeeper doing her job, not the woman who just discovered she might be rich. The front door slams, and I hear Richard's voice echoing through the house. "Maria, where are you?" His tone is sharp, impatient, different from the fake politeness he usually shows me. "Up here, Mr. Henderson," I call back, hating how small my voice sounds. His footsteps on the stairs are heavy, deliberate. When he appears in the doorway, there's something in his eyes I've never seen before, something that makes me take a step back without meaning to. "We need to talk," he says, and I notice he's not alone. There's a man with him, someone I don't recognize, tall, wearing a suit that probably costs more than I make in a month. He's looking at me like I'm a problem that needs solving. "This is my associate, Mr. Brennan," Richard says. "He has some questions about my aunt's final days, about conversations you might have had with her." The letter against my chest feels like it's burning. They know something, maybe not everything, but something. "I'm not sure what you mean," I say, but my voice cracks on the last word. Richard steps closer, and I can smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else, something that reminds me of fear. "Maria, I think you know exactly what I mean. My aunt was a very wealthy woman, and wealthy people sometimes do foolish things when they're lonely. Sometimes they make promises they shouldn't make." The way he says promises makes my skin crawl. This isn't about cleaning schedules or work references. This is about money, and they think I know where it is, because I do. "Mrs. Henderson never mentioned any promises to me," I lie, and I'm getting better at it by the second. Fear has a way of sharpening your survival instincts. Mr. Brennan pulls out a small notepad and clicks his pen. The sound is unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "We understand you spent considerable time with Mrs. Henderson in her final months. Daily visits, shared meals, long conversations. It's not a question, so I don't answer. But my mind is racing. How much do they know? How long have they been watching? The thing is, Maria, Richard continues, moving to the window and looking out at the street, my aunt's financial records don't add up. Money that should be in her accounts isn't there. Money that should have been declared on her taxes seems to have vanished. I force myself to keep dusting the same picture frame over and over. It's Mrs. Henderson's wedding photo, the one that hid the letter. She looks so young, so hopeful. Did she know even then that her family would one day hunt through her belongings like vultures? I wouldn't know anything about her finances, I say. I just cleaned her house. Mr. Brennan makes a note. Tell us about the last time you saw her alive. The question hits me like a physical blow. The last time I saw Mrs. Henderson, she was sitting in her kitchen, wearing her blue robe, drinking tea from her favourite cup. She looked tired, older than usual. She kept glancing at the clock like she was waiting for something. It was a Thursday, I say carefully. I came to clean as usual. She seemed fine. Did she give you anything that day? Any papers, envelopes, instructions? My heart is pounding so hard I'm sure they can hear it. No, nothing like that. But that's not entirely true. She did give me something that day, though I didn't understand it at the time. She hugged me goodbye, which she'd never done before. She held on longer than normal, and when she pulled away, her eyes were wet. Promise me something, Maria, she had said. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel invisible again. At the time, I thought it was just the ramblings of a lonely old woman. Now I realise it was a farewell. Richard turns from the window, and his expression has changed. The fake politeness is gone, replaced by something harder. Here's what I think happened, Maria. I think my aunt, in her declining mental state, made some very poor decisions about her money. I think she may have even given some of it away without understanding the legal implications. She wasn't declining, I snap before I can stop myself. Mrs. Henderson was sharp as a tack right up until the end. The silence that follows is deafening. Mr. Brennan stops writing and looks up at me with new interest. Richard's mouth curves into something that might be a smile, but feels more like a threat. Interesting, Richard says. So you would say she was competent to make financial decisions in her final months? I realise I've walked into a trap. If I say yes, I'm confirming that any gifts or bequests she made were legally valid. If I say no, I'm contradicting what I just said and admitting she wasn't in her right mind. I think, I say slowly, that Mrs. Henderson was a very private person who didn't discuss her business with the help. Mr. Brennan writes something down and tears the page from his notepad. He hands it to Richard, who reads it and nods. We're going to need to search the house more thoroughly, Richard says, and we'll need you to sign some documents stating that you received no gifts or promises from my aunt. The letter against my chest feels heavier with each word. They want me to sign away my claim to whatever Mrs. Henderson left me. They want me to disappear back into invisibility, back to scrubbing toilets and being grateful for the privilege. I need to think about it, I say. There's nothing to think about. Richard's voice is steel now. You'll sign the papers, or we'll have to assume you're hiding something. And if you're hiding something, Maria, we'll find it. The threat hangs in the air like smoke. I look at these two men in their expensive suits, standing in the home of a woman who showed me more kindness than my own family ever did. And I feel something I haven't felt in years. Rage. Pure, clean rage that starts in my chest and spreads through my whole body. They want to erase Mrs. Henderson's wishes. They want to steal her final act of love and turn it into another piece of property they can liquidate. I'll think about it, I repeat, and this time my voice doesn't shake. Mr. Brennan exchanges a look with Richard. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the papers. I suggest you use the time to consider your options carefully. They leave without another word, and I'm alone in the house with the ghosts of Mrs. Henderson's memories and a letter that could change everything. I have until tomorrow to decide whether I'm going to fight for what's mine or let them win. I know what the old Maria would do. She'd sign the papers, take her final paycheck, and go back to being invisible, but the old Maria never had anything worth fighting for. I couldn't sleep last night. Every sound in my tiny apartment felt like footsteps outside my door, like someone coming to take away the one good thing that might happen to me. So at 6 a.m, I made a decision that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I'm going to the bank. The key was exactly where Mrs. Henderson said it would be, taped under her jewellery box. Such a small thing to hold such enormous possibility. My hands shook as I peeled it free, and I swear I could feel her presence in the room, urging me forward. First National Bank opens at 9, but I've been sitting in my car across the street since 8:30, watching the employees unlock the doors and flip on the lights. Normal people doing normal things while I sit here with a key that could change my life forever. The authorization letter is folded in my purse, along with my ID and every prayer I've ever learned. Mrs. Henderson's handwriting is shaky but legal, witnessed and notarized 3 months ago. 3 months she carried this secret, and I never knew. At exactly 9 o'clock, I walk through those glass doors like I belong there, like I'm not a housekeeper about to discover if fairy tales really do come true. The bank manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, is professional but kind. She examines the letter carefully, checks my identification twice, and leads me to the vault. Box 247, she says, inserting her key alongside mine. Mrs. Henderson was a lovely woman. I'm sorry for your loss. The box is heavier than I expected. We carry it to a private viewing room, and Mrs. Rodriguez leaves me alone with whatever Mrs. Henderson deemed worth hiding from her family. My hands are trembling as I lift the lid. The first thing I see is a photograph of Mrs. Henderson and me taken last Christmas, when she insisted on documenting our tea party. I'm smiling in the picture, really smiling, and so is she. We look like family. Underneath the photo are bank statements, investment records, and account numbers that make my eyes water. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just wealthy, she was rich. Really rich, and according to these documents, she'd been quietly moving money for years, hiding it from everyone. The safety deposit box contains deeds to 3 properties I didn't know she owned, including a beach house in Florida and a cabin in the mountains. There are stock certificates, bonds, and jewellery that probably cost more than I've earned in my entire life. But the most important document is at the bottom. A will. Not the one her family knows about, but a real will, signed and witnessed, leaving everything in this box to me. Everything. I sit in that small room for what feels like hours, reading through documents that transform me from a struggling housekeeper into a woman of means. The numbers are staggering. Enough money to buy a house, to travel, to never worry about rent or groceries again. But there's something else in the box that makes my blood run cold. A manila envelope marked insurance in Mrs. Henderson's handwriting. Inside are photographs, surveillance reports, and a letter addressed to me. The photographs show Richard Henderson entering Mrs. Henderson's house at night, using keys she never gave him. The surveillance reports, paid for by a private investigator, document months of suspicious activity, phone calls from debt collectors looking for Richard, financial records showing his business failures, his gambling debts, his desperate need for money. Mrs. Henderson's letter is dated 1 week before she died. My dear Maria, if you're reading this, then my fears were justified. I believe Richard means to harm me. I've moved all my assets to this box because I don't trust him with my house or my bank accounts. If something happens to me, please know that you were the light in my final years. You treated me like family when my real family treated me like an ATM. Everything here is yours, but please be careful. Richard is more dangerous than he seems. The room feels smaller suddenly, like the walls are closing in. Mrs. Henderson didn't just leave me her fortune, she left me evidence that her nephew might have killed her for it. I'm not just rich now, I'm a target. My phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number. We know you went to the bank. We know what you found. We need to talk. They've been watching me. They know about the box, about the will, about everything. And now they know I know. I take pictures of every document with my phone, then carefully place everything back in the box. Mrs. Rodriguez helps me return it to the vault, and I walk out of that bank a different person than I was when I walked in. I'm a wealthy woman now, but I'm also a woman who might not live long enough to enjoy her wealth. The question that's haunting me as I drive home is one that could determine whether I survive this. If Mrs. Henderson was right about Richard, if he really did kill her for her money, what's he going to do when he finds out that money now belongs to me? And more importantly, what am I going to do about it? I'm not going home. That's the first smart decision I've made all day. Instead, I'm sitting in a coffee shop across town, trying to process what I've learned and figure out how to stay alive long enough to enjoy my inheritance. The text message keeps buzzing in my mind. We know you went to the bank. How could they know so quickly? Are they watching the bank? Are they watching me? I order another coffee I don't need and try to think like someone who has something to lose. The old Maria would have panicked, would have signed whatever papers they put in front of her just to make the problem go away. But the old Maria never had evidence that someone might be a murderer. Mrs. Henderson's private investigator was thorough. The surveillance photos show Richard entering the house at least 6 times in the month before she died, always at night, always using keys she never gave him. The financial records paint a picture of a man drowning in debt, desperate enough to do anything for money. But knowing Richard might be a killer and proving it are two different things, and until I can prove it, I'm in danger. My phone rings, and I nearly jump out of my skin. It's a number I don't recognize, but I answer anyway. Maria! The voice is Richard's, but it's different now, colder. We need to meet. I'm busy, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't think you understand the situation you're in. My aunt may have filled your head with promises, but legally, you have no claim to anything that belongs to my family. Your family? The words come out sharper than I intended. Your family that visited her maybe 3 times in the last year? Your family that couldn't be bothered to attend her funeral? Careful, Maria. You're walking on very thin ice. Maybe, but at least I'm not a murderer. The silence on the other end stretches so long I wonder if he's hung up. When he speaks again, his voice is barely above a whisper. What did you say? I said maybe I'm walking on thin ice, but at least I'm not a murderer. Another pause. Meet me at the house tonight, 10 o'clock. Come alone. The line goes dead, and I'm left staring at my phone, wondering if I've just signed my own death warrant. But I've come too far to back down now. Mrs. Henderson trusted me with her secrets, and I'm not going to let her down, even if it kills me. I spend the rest of the day making preparations. I email copies of all the documents to my sister in California with instructions to give them to the police if anything happens to me. I write a letter explaining everything I know about Mrs. Henderson's death and Richard's debts. I hide the original documents in my apartment and make copies to take with me. If Richard Henderson wants to play games, I'm going to make sure he knows I'm not as helpless as he thinks. At 9:30, I park outside Mrs. Henderson's house and sit in my car watching the windows. The house is dark except for a single light in the kitchen. The same kitchen where Mrs. Henderson and I shared so many cups of tea, where she told me stories about her life and listened to mine. I'm not the same woman who cleaned this house for 10 years. I'm not the invisible housekeeper who said yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and grateful for any scraps of kindness. I'm a woman with something to fight for, and I'm done being afraid. Richard's Mercedes is already in the driveway when I walk up to the front door. My key still works, and I let myself in like I have 1,000 times before, but this time feels different. This time, I'm not here to clean. "Maria!" Richard's voice comes from the kitchen. "Is that you?" I follow the sound of his voice, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The house feels hollow without Mrs. Henderson's presence, like all the life has been sucked out of it. Richard is sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where Mrs. Henderson and I used to share our afternoon tea. There's a manila folder in front of him and a pen. No sign of Mr. Brennan or anyone else. "Sit down," he says without looking up. I remain standing. I prefer to stand. "Suit yourself." He opens the folder and slides a document across the table. "This is a simple affidavit stating that you received no gifts or promises from my aunt. Sign it and we can all move on with our lives." I don't even look at the papers. And if I don't sign, then things get complicated for both of us. The threat in his voice is unmistakable, but I'm not backing down, not anymore. "I know what you did, Richard." He looks up at me then, and I see something flicker in his eyes. Fear, anger, guilt. "I don't know what you think you know, but I know about the gambling debts. I know about the business failures. I know about the times you broke into this house when your aunt was alive." I pull out my phone and show him one of the surveillance photos. "I know you killed her." The words hang in the air between us like a weapon. Richard stares at the photo, and I watch his face change, the mask of respectability slipping away to reveal something darker underneath. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. "Mrs. Henderson hired a private investigator. She knew you were planning something, and she took steps to protect herself and her assets. The only thing she didn't count on was how far you'd go to get what you wanted." Richard stands up slowly, and I take a step back. We're alone in this house, and I'm beginning to realize that coming here might have been a mistake. "Even if that were true," he says, "who's going to believe the word of a housekeeper over a respected businessman? The police will believe bank records. They'll believe surveillance photos. They'll believe a will that leaves everything to the person who actually cared about her." His face goes white. "Will? Did you really think she'd leave everything to you? After the way you treated her?" The kitchen feels smaller now, and I'm very aware of how far I am from the door. Richard is between me and the exit, and the expression on his face is not one of a man who's planning to let me walk out of here. "You're going to sign that paper," he says, moving around the table toward me, "and then you're going to forget everything you think you know. Or what? Or you'll have an accident, just like my aunt did." And there it is, the confession I needed to hear. The admission that Mrs. Henderson didn't die of natural causes. But as Richard moves closer, I realise that being right might not be enough to save me. Richard's admission hangs in the air like smoke, and I realise I've made a terrible mistake coming here alone. But sometimes the only way forward is through the fire. "So you did kill her," I say, backing toward the kitchen counter. My hand finds the knife block behind me. "How? Poison? Suffocation? Did you make it look like a heart attack?" "She was old," Richard says, still moving closer. "Old people die. Sometimes they just need a little help." The casual way he says it makes my blood run cold. Mrs. Henderson, who trusted everyone and saw the good in people, never saw this coming. She hired a private investigator to watch him, but she still let him into her house. She still believed family meant something. "The pills," I say, understanding suddenly. "You switched her heart medication." His smile is confirmation enough. "She didn't suffer. I'm not a monster, Maria. I just did what needed to be done." "What needed to be done?" My voice is rising and I don't care. "She was your aunt. She loved you. She was a selfish old woman who was going to throw away our family's legacy on the help." He spits the last word like it's poison. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch someone flush away millions of dollars on charity cases?" "I wasn't a charity case. I was her friend. You were the hired help. And now you're going to sign that paper and disappear. Or you're going to disappear anyway. My fingers close around the handle of a kitchen knife. It's not much, but it's something. People know I'm here. If something happens to me, who's going to believe you told anyone? You're a paranoid housekeeper who's been watching too many crime shows. You came here to steal from my aunt's estate. We struggled, and you fell down the stairs. These old houses are dangerous. The certainty in his voice tells me he's thought this through. He's planned it, just like he planned Mrs. Henderson's death. But he's made one crucial mistake. He's underestimated me. You're right about one thing, I say, pulling the knife from the block. These old houses are dangerous. But you're not the only one who's been planning. Richard stops moving toward me, his eyes fixed on the knife. Maria, put that down. You don't want to do something you'll regret. I regret a lot of things. I regret not seeing what you were doing to her. I regret not being there when she needed me most, but I'm not going to regret fighting for what's mine. It's not yours! The veneer of calm cracks, revealing the rage underneath. It's my family's money, my inheritance. You're nothing but a cleaning lady who got lucky. I'm the person she chose. I'm the person she trusted. And I'm the person who's going to make sure you pay for what you did. I'm not sure where the courage is coming from. Maybe it's Mrs. Henderson's spirit. Or maybe it's just the realization that I'd rather die fighting than live on my knees. Either way, I'm not backing down. Richard lunges forward, and I swing the knife in a wide arc. It catches him across the forearm, and he staggers back, blood soaking through his expensive shirt. You crazy bitch! He's holding his arm, but his eyes are filled with a rage that promises violence. You're going to pay for that. Send me a bill, I say, but my voice is shaking now. The knife feels heavy in my hand, and I realize I don't know if I can actually use it to kill someone, even someone like Richard. That moment of hesitation is all he needs. He grabs a cast iron pan from the stove and swings it at my head. I duck, but not fast enough. The pan catches me across the temple and stars explode behind my eyes. I stumble, the knife clattering to the floor. Richard kicks it away and grabs me by the shoulders, his fingers digging into my flesh. You should have signed the papers, he says, and I can smell the metallic scent of blood on his breath. Now you're going to have to join my aunt. But as he drags me toward the basement door, I remember something Mrs. Henderson told me about this house. Something about the old Victorian architecture and the way sound carries through the heating vents. I take a deep breath and scream. Not a cry for help, but a scream of pure rage and defiance that echoes through every room of the house. And then I hear it. The sound of footsteps on the front porch, car doors slamming, voices calling my name. Richard hears it too, and his grip loosens just enough for me to break free. I run toward the front door, blood streaming down my face, and throw it open to find 2 police officers standing on the porch. Mrs. Gonzalez? The taller officer looks concerned. We received a call about a disturbance. Behind me, I hear Richard's voice, smooth and reasonable again. Officers, thank God you're here. This woman has been threatening me. She attacked me with a knife. I turn to face him, and even through the blood and pain, I smile. That's interesting, Richard, because I never called myself Mrs. Gonzalez. The officers exchange glances, and I realize my sister in California didn't just save my documents. She called the police. I think we need to sort this out at the station, the shorter officer says. All of us, as they lead Richard away in handcuffs. I stand in the doorway of Mrs. Henderson's house and think about the question that's been haunting me throughout this whole ordeal. What happens when someone who's been invisible finally finds something worth fighting for? I guess I'm about to find out. The police station smells like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. I've been sitting in this hard plastic chair for 3 hours, giving my statement to Detective Morrison, a woman who looks like she's seen enough ugliness to last several lifetimes. So you're telling me, she says, reviewing her notes, that Mrs. Henderson hired a private investigator to watch her own nephew, and that investigator documented evidence of breaking and entering. That's right. I touch the bandage on my temple where Richard hit me with the pan. Mrs. Henderson was scared. She knew something was wrong. And you have copies of these surveillance reports? I nod, pulling out the folder I prepared earlier. Bank records too. Shows his gambling debts, his business failures. He was desperate for money. Detective Morrison flips through the documents with professional interest. This is thorough work. Professional grade. Who was the PI? Someone named Jack Carver. His business card was in the envelope with the reports. We'll need to speak with him, and we'll need to examine Mrs. Henderson's body. The thought of Mrs. Henderson's body being disturbed makes my stomach turn, but I know it's necessary. Will you be able to prove he killed her? If he switched her heart medication like you suspect, there might be traces in her system. It's been 2 weeks since she died, but we might get lucky. 2 weeks. It feels like a lifetime since I was just a housekeeper worried about losing my job. Now I'm a wealthy woman who's watched someone confess to murder. What about Richard? What's he saying? Detective Morrison's expression is carefully neutral. He's claiming self-defense, says you attacked him with a knife and he was protecting himself. That's not what happened. I believe you, but believing and proving are different things. He's hired a very expensive lawyer, and they're going to argue that you're an unstable employee who became obsessed with your employer. The words hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even with everything I know, they're going to try to make me disappear. They're going to try to make me invisible again. But I have the will. I have the surveillance photos. You have a lot of circumstantial evidence, but without a recording of his confession, it's your word against his. I lean back in the chair, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling over me. So he's going to get away with it. I didn't say that. We're going to examine Mrs. Henderson's body, interview the PI, and build a case. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that this won't be easy. Through the window, I can see Richard Henderson in another interview room, talking with his lawyer. He looks calm, confident, like a man who's used to getting what he wants. But then I remember something that might change everything. Detective, I need to ask you something. When you arrest someone, do you take their phone? Usually. Why? Because Richard called me earlier today. He made threats, and my phone records everything. Detective Morrison looks up from her notes with new interest. Everything! I have an app that records all my calls. My ex-husband used to make threatening calls after he left, so I started recording them for protection. And you think you recorded Richard's threats? I know I did. He told me to meet him at the house. He said things would get complicated if I didn't sign his papers. For the first time since I've been here, Detective Morrison smiles. Mrs. Gonzalez, I think you might just have given us what we need. 20 minutes later, I'm listening to my own conversation with Richard through the police station's speakers. His voice is clear, threatening, and utterly incriminating. I don't think you understand the situation you're in, his recorded voice says. My aunt may have filled your head with promises, but legally, you have no claim to anything that belongs to my family. And then, the most damning part, meet me at the house tonight, 10 o'clock. Come alone. Detective Morrison stops the recording. That's conspiracy to commit assault at minimum, and given what happened when you got there, it supports your version of events. What happens now? Now we build a case. We exhume Mrs. Henderson's body. We interview the PI. We examine the financial records. And we make sure Richard Henderson faces justice for what he did. As I leave the police station, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope. Not just for myself, but for Mrs. Henderson. She trusted me with her secrets, and I'm not going to let her down. But walking to my car, I realize that winning this battle is only the beginning. Richard's family has money, connections, and influence. They're going to fight the will, question Mrs. Henderson's mental state, and try to paint me as a gold-digging opportunist. I'm about to learn that being rich doesn't automatically make you powerful, and that sometimes the hardest fight is the one that comes after you think you've won. But I'm not the same woman who started this journey. I'm not invisible anymore, and I'm not going to let them make me disappear. Mrs. Henderson gave me more than money. She gave me the courage to fight for what's mine. And I'm just getting started. The lawyers circle like vultures, and I'm starting to understand why Mrs. Henderson was so careful about hiding her assets. Richard's family has descended on this case like a plague of locusts, determined to devour everything in their path. I'm sitting in the law office of Patricia Valdez, the attorney I hired with some of my newfound wealth. She's sharp, experienced, and expensive, but she's also the only lawyer in town who was willing to take on the Henderson family. They're filing 3 separate challenges to the will, she explains, spreading documents across her desk. First, they're claiming your employer lacked mental capacity when she wrote it. Second, they're alleging undue influence, that you manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman. Third, they're questioning the validity of the will itself. But it's legal, right? Mrs. Henderson had it witnessed and notarized. The will is legally sound, but that doesn't mean they can't make your life hell challenging it. They have resources, Maria. They can drag this out for years. Years. The word hits me like a physical blow. I thought finding the will would be the end of my struggles, but it's just the beginning. What about Richard? What's happening with the murder charges? Patricia's expression darkens. That's complicated. The medical examiner found traces of digoxin in your employer's system, but her lawyer is arguing that she was prescribed that medication for her heart condition. But in the wrong dosage, right? Richard switched her pills. The problem is proving intent. Richard's lawyer is claiming that Mrs. Henderson, in her confused state, may have accidentally taken the wrong dosage herself. But that's ridiculous. She was sharp as a tack. You and I know that. But juries see an elderly woman who left her fortune to the housekeeper, and they start wondering about mental capacity. I lean back in the leather chair, feeling the weight of the fight ahead. So what do? We fight. We use every piece of evidence we have. The surveillance reports, the financial records, the recording of Richard's threats. We prove that Mrs. Henderson was of sound mind and that she had good reason to fear her nephew. Patricia slides another document across the desk. But there's something else you need to know. The family is being very aggressive in their tactics. They've hired a private investigator to dig into your background. What kind of background? Everything. Your marriage, your divorce, your financial struggles. They're looking for anything they can use to paint you as a desperate woman who would do anything for money. The invasion of privacy feels like a violation, but I'm not surprised. The Henderson family has shown they'll do anything to protect their interests. Let them dig. I have nothing to hide. Are you sure about that? Because they're going to examine every relationship you've ever had, every financial decision you've ever made. They're going to try to find evidence that you were planning this for years. I think about my ex-husband, about the debts he left behind, about the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering how I was going to pay rent. I was struggling, yes, but I never asked Mrs. Henderson for anything. I never even knew she had money. I believe you, but we need to be prepared for what they might find. As if summoned by our conversation, Patricia's assistant knocks on the door. Mrs. Valdez, the Henderson family's legal team is here. They're requesting an immediate meeting. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I can see them. Richard's sister Margaret, his brother David, and their team of lawyers. They look like they've come to war. Should I go? I ask. No, you stay. You have every right to be here. We move to the conference room, and I find myself face to face with the Henderson family for the first time since this all began. Margaret is a thin woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. David is younger, softer, but there's something predatory in his expression. "This is highly irregular," Margaret says without preamble. "We're here to discuss a private family matter. Ms. Gonzalez is the primary beneficiary of Mrs. Henderson's estate," Patricia responds smoothly. "She has every right to be present." "Primary beneficiary of a fraudulent will, you mean?" David interjects. "Our aunt was clearly not competent when she wrote that document." "Your aunt was competent enough to hire a private investigator to watch your brother," I say, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "She was competent enough to know he was planning to hurt her." The room falls silent. Margaret's lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looks like he's never lost a case, leans forward. "Ms. Gonzalez, we're prepared to offer you a settlement, $100,000 to walk away from this claim and never speak about the family again." $100,000. 6 months ago, that would have been life-changing money. Now it feels like an insult. "Your aunt left me everything because she wanted me to have it," I say. "She trusted me to carry out her wishes." "Our aunt was a lonely old woman who was manipulated by someone she trusted," Margaret says, her voice dripping with venom. "Someone who saw an opportunity and took advantage of it. I never took advantage of her. I was her friend." "Friends don't inherit millions of dollars from their employers," David says. "That's not friendship, that's exploitation." The accusation hits me like a slap. These people, who couldn't be bothered to visit their aunt when she was alive, are now claiming moral high ground about her death. "Where were you when she was dying?" I ask, my voice rising. "Where were you when she was scared and alone?" I was there when she needed someone to listen, someone to care." "You were there to position yourself for this windfall," Margaret's lawyer says, "and we're going to prove it." "Good luck with that," Patricia says, standing up, "because we're going to prove that your client's brother killed Mrs. Henderson for money he thought he was going to inherit." The meeting ends with threats and ultimatums from both sides. As they file out, Margaret turns back to me. "You have no idea what you're up against," she says. "We will destroy you before we let you steal what belongs to our family." "It doesn't belong to your family," I reply. "It belongs to me, because I'm the one who loved her." After they leave, I sit in the conference room feeling drained but determined. This is going to be a long fight, and it's going to get ugly. But I think about Mrs. Henderson, about the woman who saw value in someone the world had written off. She believed I was worth fighting for. And now I'm going to prove she was right. The Henderson family has money and connections, but they don't have what I have. The truth and the unshakable knowledge that I'm fighting for something bigger than money. I'm fighting for love, for dignity, and for the memory of a woman who deserved better than the family she was born into. The call comes at 6 in the morning, dragging me from the first peaceful sleep I've had in weeks. Detective Morrison's voice is tense, urgent. "Maria, I need you to come to the station, now." "What's wrong? Is it about Richard?" "Just come, and bring your lawyer." An hour later, Patricia and I are sitting across from Detective Morrison in the same interview room where I gave my statement. But this time, there's something different in the detective's expression, something that looks like vindication. "We found something," she says, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Jack Carver, the private investigator Mrs. Henderson hired, kept meticulous records. But there's something in his files that changes everything." I open the folder with trembling hands. Inside are photographs, but not the ones I've seen before. These are different, clearer, and they show something that makes my blood run cold. "That's Margaret Henderson," Detective Morrison says. pointing to a figure in one of the surveillance photos. "Richard's sister. She was there the night Mrs. Henderson died." The photograph shows Margaret entering the house at 11:47 p.m. using her own key. Another photo shows her leaving at 1:23 a.m. carrying a small bag. "She was there," I whisper. "She was there when Mrs. Henderson died." It gets worse. Carver's notes indicate that Margaret knew about the safety deposit box. She'd been pressuring Mrs. Henderson to change her will for months. Patricia is studying the photographs with professional interest. "This changes everything. If Margaret was involved in the murder, she wasn't just involved," Detective Morrison says grimly. "We think she was the one who actually did it. Richard was the distraction, the obvious suspect. Margaret was the one with the medical knowledge to know exactly how to switch the medications." Medical knowledge? Margaret Henderson is a retired nurse. She worked in cardiology for 20 years before she married money and quit. She knew exactly how digoxin works, knew how to make it look like a heart attack. The pieces are falling into place, creating a picture that's more horrifying than I imagined. This wasn't just about Richard's gambling debts. This was a family conspiracy. "We're bringing Margaret in for questioning this morning," Detective Morrison continues, "and we're re-examining everything with this new information." "What does this mean for the will contest?" I ask. "It means the family's moral authority just evaporated," Patricia says with satisfaction. "It's hard to argue that you manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman when two of her family members conspired to murder her. But even as relief washes over me, I feel something else. Sadness for Mrs. Henderson, who died believing that at least some of her family loved her. She never knew that both of her nephew and niece were planning her death. There's something else, Detective Morrison says. In Carver's files, there's a recording. Mrs. Henderson asked him to wire her house for sound in the final weeks of her life. She was that scared. A recording of what? Of Margaret and Richard discussing their plans, 3 days before Mrs. Henderson died. The detective sets up a small audio player, and suddenly the room fills with voices I recognise. Margaret and Richard speaking in hushed tones in Mrs. Henderson's living room. "She's getting suspicious," Margaret's voice says. "She changed her locks again, and she's been asking questions about the will." "We need to move fast," Richard replies. "If she goes to the police." "She won't, but we can't wait much longer. The old bat is tougher than we thought." "You're sure about the dosage?" "I'm sure. It'll look like her heart just gave out. Natural causes. And the will? Once she's gone, we'll contest whatever she's written. No court is going to give millions to the cleaning lady." The recording continues for another 10 minutes, detailing their plan to kill Mrs. Henderson and steal her fortune. By the end, I'm crying, not just from grief, but from rage. "She trusted them," I say through my tears. "Even after everything, she still let them into her house." "She was too good for them," Patricia says quietly. "Too trusting. That's why she left everything to you," Detective Morrison adds. "She knew you were the only one who genuinely cared about her." The recording changes everything. Within hours, Margaret Henderson is under arrest. David, the younger brother, is cooperating with police, claiming he had no knowledge of his siblings' plans. But the legal battle is far from over. Even with Margaret and Richard facing murder charges, the rest of the Henderson family is still fighting the will. They're arguing that Mrs. Henderson was under duress when she wrote it, that she was scared and not thinking clearly. "Let them fight," I tell Patricia as we leave the police station. Mrs. Henderson made her choice. She chose me because she knew I would honour her memory. "This is going to be a long battle," Patricia warns. "Even with the recordings, even with the murder charges, they have resources. They're going to appeal everything, challenge every decision. Then we'll fight them every step of the way." As I drive home, I think about Mrs. Henderson's final gift to me. Not just the money, but the lesson that came with it. She taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about love, loyalty, and choice. She chose me, and now I'm going to make sure her choice is honored. But first, I'm going to mourn the woman who saw worth in someone the world had written off. The woman who died because she loved too much and trusted too easily. The woman who changed my life by showing me that I mattered. 6 months later, I'm standing in the courthouse wearing a dress that cost more than I used to make in a month. Not because I'm trying to show off, but because Patricia insisted I look the part of a woman who deserves respect. Confidence is half the battle, she told me. Make them see you as an equal, not as the help. The will contest has been brutal. The Henderson family brought in handwriting experts, psychiatric evaluators, and character witnesses. They painted me as a manipulative gold digger who preyed on a vulnerable old woman. But we had the truth on our side. And sometimes, in a world that doesn't often favour people like me, the truth is enough. The judge is reviewing her notes, and the silence in the courtroom is deafening. Richard and Margaret are both in prison awaiting trial for murder, but their family has continued the fight. David Henderson sits with his lawyers, looking like a man who's already lost. In the matter of the estate of Eleanor Henderson, the judge begins, this court has carefully considered all evidence presented. My heart is pounding so hard I can barely hear her words. The will dated 3 months before Mrs. Henderson's death is a legally valid document, properly witnessed and notarized. The evidence shows that Mrs. Henderson was of sound mind and under no duress when she executed this will. She continues, but I'm already crying. Patricia squeezes my hand under the table. Furthermore, the court finds that Mrs. Henderson had compelling reasons for her decisions, given the criminal behaviour of other family members. The will is upheld in its entirety. The gavel comes down, and I'm officially a wealthy woman. But more than that, I'm a woman who fought for what was right and won. Outside the courthouse, reporters are waiting. The story of the housekeeper who inherited millions and exposed a family murder plot has captured the public imagination. Ms. Gonzalez, a reporter calls out, what are you going to do with your inheritance? I think about Mrs. Henderson, about the loneliness in her eyes, and the way she lit up when someone showed her genuine kindness. I'm going to start a foundation, I say, for elderly people who are isolated and vulnerable, so no one else has to die alone and scared like Mrs. Henderson did. Any regrets about fighting the family? My only regret is that Mrs. Henderson didn't live to see justice served, but I think she would be proud of what we accomplished. As I walk away from the courthouse, I think about the journey that brought me here. From invisible housekeeper to millionaire philanthropist. From someone who cleaned up other people's messes to someone who can clean up the mess of a broken system. But the real victory isn't the money. It's the knowledge that I kept faith with a woman who believed in me when no one else did. I honoured her memory and made sure her story was told. The Eleanor Henderson Foundation for Senior Care will open next month. We'll provide companionship services, legal advocacy and protection for elderly people who are vulnerable to exploitation by their families. Because Mrs. Henderson was right about one thing: family isn't about blood. It's about love, loyalty, and choice. And sometimes, the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into. 1 year later, I'm standing in the lobby of the Eleanor Henderson Centre, our first residential facility for vulnerable seniors. The building is beautiful, modern, comfortable, filled with light and laughter. But the most beautiful thing is the faces of the residents. People who were isolated, forgotten, or mistreated by their families now have a place where they're valued and protected. Mrs. Gonzalez, a young woman approaches me with a clipboard. The new resident, Mr. Patterson, is here for his tour. I smile. I still haven't gotten used to being called Mrs. Gonzalez in a tone of respect rather than condescension, but I'm learning to like it. Mr. Patterson is 83 years old. a retired teacher whose son has been trying to get control of his finances. He reminds me of Mrs. Henderson, intelligent, kind, and far too trusting for his own good. "Welcome to the Eleanor Henderson Center," I tell him as we walk through the facility. "This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. And my son can't force me to leave, not without a court order. And we have lawyers who make sure that doesn't happen unless there's a genuine medical need." The relief on his face is heartbreaking. How many people are out there right now, scared and alone, waiting for their families to decide their fate? "Tell me about Eleanor Henderson," he says, as we sit in the garden. "The woman this place is named after." I tell him about Mrs. Henderson's kindness, her loneliness, her final gift of love and trust. I tell him about the family that killed her for money and the justice that finally came. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," he says. "She was. She saw worth in people when no one else did. She believed that everyone deserves dignity and respect, no matter what their circumstances. And she changed your life. She saved my life, but more than that, she showed me how to save myself." As evening falls, I walk through the center one more time before heading home to the beautiful house I bought with Mrs. Henderson's money, but more importantly, home to the life I've built with her gifts. The foundation has grown beyond what I ever imagined. We have 3 centers now, with plans for more. We've helped hundreds of elderly people escape abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We've given them something Mrs. Henderson never had, a family that chooses them back. Richard and Margaret Henderson were both convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. David Henderson lost his appeal and had to pay substantial court costs. The family name is forever tainted by what they did. But their loss is everyone else's gain. Mrs. Henderson's money is doing exactly what she wanted it to do, making the world a little kinder, a little safer, for people who need protection. As I drive home, I think about the letter that started it all. The yellowed piece of paper that changed everything I believed about my life and my worth. Mrs. Henderson's final words to me were, "Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel invisible again." I kept that promise, but more than that, I've made sure that no one else has to feel invisible either. The Eleanor Henderson Foundation has become something bigger than either of us ever imagined. It's become a legacy of love, a monument to the power of choosing kindness over cruelty, compassion over greed. And every day, as I help another vulnerable person find safety and dignity, I can feel Mrs. Henderson's presence with me. She's in every act of kindness, every moment of connection, every life we save. She gave me more than money. She gave me purpose. She gave me the chance to honor her memory by living up to the faith she placed in me. Sometimes the most profound gifts come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the people who change our lives are the ones we least expect to notice us. And sometimes love really does leave you a fortune. Not just in money, but in the chance to make a difference in the world. Mrs. Henderson couldn't have known that her final act of kindness would grow into something that would help thousands of people. But I think she would be proud of what we've built together. I think she would be proud that her housekeeper became someone who could clean up the mess of a broken system and make it a little more just. I think she would be proud that love won. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt invisible or overlooked, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, justice, and the power of human connection. And tell us in the comments, have you ever had someone believe in you when no one else did? Have you ever been the person who chose to see worth in someone others overlooked? Because Mrs. Henderson's story isn't just about money, it's about the transformative power of love, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the truth that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come from the most ordinary moments of kindness. Remember, you are never invisible. You always matter, and sometimes the love you give to others comes back to you in ways you never could have imagined. Thank you for listening to Mrs. Henderson's story. Thank you for helping me honour her memory. And thank you for believing, like she did, that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and loved.